This morning, we have Greg Butts with another update on a pretty exciting adventure. Took place earlier this year around one of those moon, sun things. What is that called, David?
Might be an eclipse.
Unclear, an eclipse. There we go.
Good morning, everybody. Let's see. So, this morning I thought I would follow up on David's talk about the role of failure in our eclipse balloon project, and I thought you might like to hear my perspective. To be fair, it really was a team success, and the failures David talked about were both of ours. And I want to echo everything that David said. Our failures enabled us to succeed, and we could have had even more success if we'd given ourselves more chances to fail ahead of time. But I'd like to talk this morning about two other ingredients that helped us succeed. So this was a really ambitious project that took a huge amount of effort to prepare for. And I want to tell you that willingness to fail, ambition, and preparation are traits that you can cultivate in yourself, things that you can do. So first, where this ambition came from. Even if you've never experienced a total solar eclipse, and even though the photos really don't do it justice, you've seen photos and know what the sun looks like with the moon in front of it. But a few years ago, something made me ask the question, what does an eclipse look like from above? What does the Earth look like with the moon's shadow on it? So I did what any casual researcher would do. And after about a half an hour of Googling, I realized that there really weren't good pictures of the moon's shadow on the Earth. This was a picture from the space station taken by NASA. You can kind of get a sense of what's going on there, but the Russian Mir took this photo, which is pretty cool, but pretty grainy, low-resolution 90s camera technology. And it turns out that there aren't a lot of good pictures from space stations because the space station doesn't have a very good view of the whole Earth. It's 250 to 400 miles above the surface. It can't be steered. And once every 18 months or so, when there's an eclipse, lots of times it's not looking at the 3% of the Earth where the eclipse is. I did come across some video from a weather balloon that a Romanian guy had sent up during an eclipse in Australia, and it was pretty inspiring, but not quite satisfying, because the geometry of that eclipse wasn't great. So let me explain. Here is the Earth and the moon, and imagine that the sun is big enough to fill this room from floor to ceiling, and it's way down at Crissy Field. So the moon casts this really long shadow that hits the Earth. And during the 2012 eclipse, the moon was relatively close to the Earth. Let's zoom in a little. And it was right after dawn in Australia. So Australia was at the very edge of the Earth. So the shadow was wide and very long and hard to get a view of. But the shadow of the 2017 eclipse was going to be smaller. And in America, and I was like, if I want to see what the shadow of the moon looks like, I guess I'll have to take pictures myself. Fortunately, I met someone else crazy enough to help me do this, who also didn't have a job in the summer. So that's testing our balloon inflation bag prototype. And we decided to do this crazy, challenging project and started working on it about 18 months ago. So this was really a high-stakes project. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There's no other narrow eclipse in North America until I'm 98 years old. So our goal was to have cameras taking pictures between 80,000 and 100,000 feet at 10:20 a.m. on August 21st. It was the strictest possible deadline. The moon was not going to wait for us. And we calculated that we had a 30-minute window to launch our balloons between 7:25 and 7:55 a.m. the day of the eclipse. So pulling this off was ambitious, and it took a huge amount of planning and preparation. And honestly, I'm more interested in this kind of ambition than making a lot of money, buying a fancy car. And honestly, we didn't have that high of expectations for the pictures of this fuzzy shadow. We were willing to fail. But if we're going to go for it, we wanted to give ourselves the best chances to success, and that meant careful preparation. So the thing is, when I was in high school, I was the kind of kid whose backpack looked like this. Actually, I couldn't find a photo online that had a messy enough backpack to represent mine. I tried to remember my homework without writing it down, and I missed more homework assignments than I turned in, probably. But it turns out being organized is a skill that you can learn with practice. So for this project, we kept track of everything we needed to do in a shared to-do document that at times was 4 pages long. There were that many things we had to keep track of. So by the morning of the eclipse, we had spent maybe 1,000 hours selecting and ordering dozens of pieces of equipment, designing and constructing and tracking antennas, prototyping equipment enclosures, designing and sewing balloon inflation tents, modifying cameras to increase their battery capacity, refining calculations on how much helium to use, acquiring helium and figuring out how to transport it, predicting flight paths, planning and buying food and gear to support ourselves in the overrun eclipse zone, and driving everything to Central Oregon. And we made 4 of those things, like hanging over there. So, our balloon's ready to go. And it all came down that morning when we woke up at 4 a.m. to following 4 nearly identical laminated checklists. 2 sides. And letting our balloons go. So it turned out that there was a guy who had a drone there. And he sent us some footage of our balloon releases. So once they were in the air, the most important part of our preparation came into play. We knew we couldn't count on everything working, so we had backups and extras times 4. It was a good thing. Right after launch, we realized that none of our backup trackers were working. Eventually we found out that the number 4 camera pointed towards its balloon died an hour before the eclipse. The number 3 landscape camera died just as the eclipse arrived. 3 cameras went blurry in the cold or were poorly aimed. The number 3 tracker stopped recording regularly and we wouldn't know where it was for 15 minutes at the time. Number 2 and 3 parachutes got tangled, and as David talked about, the number 2 payload fell completely apart and we lost all of its cameras. It turned out we'd been really gentle with the equipment, and the backup trackers just didn't wake up that morning, but when they started falling at 100 miles an hour, they did start telling us where they were. And so in the end, 6 of the 15 cameras worked well, and that was enough. So this is a little animation of the balloon path over 4 hours, made from the telemetry data. And as they get close to the top, you will see really quickly an outline of the eclipse shadow fly by on the ground. You can see the Cascade Mountains, the Three Sisters, Mount Jefferson, Mount Hood. In the background, that was the eclipse. So meanwhile, as this all was happening, we just sat and watched the sun disappear with a couple of Bay alumni who came and found us. And then we started chasing the balloons. So other than tracking, we didn't know what had happened to any of the equipment until we found it in the Deschutes National Forest. So those are called the payloads on the ground. And that is a whole adventure for another time. We found the last component just before sunset. And at dinner that night, we got to preview some of the footage. You can see the shadow approaching out over the Pacific Ocean. The shadow nearby with another one of our balloons. So I looked at this and I was like, that's pretty cool. Balloons popped when they got really big, up above 100,000 feet. See you in a second. Not the softest landing. Okay, here we go. So the real payoff, though, didn't come until the ride home. David was driving, I pulled out my laptop and started looking through the 18,000 photos that the still cameras had taken. And so these are pictures from balloon number 1. And it was kind of spinning slowly, counterclockwise. And just as the eclipse was out over the ocean, about to hit the coast, I got a glimpse of it. So I was looking at these pictures, I was like, that's pretty good, but now it's turning the other direction. And in about a minute, it swung back around and the eclipse was closer, and it caught the shadow of over the coast, approaching the Cascades. And then it stopped spinning, just as the eclipse was getting to us, and followed it as it engulfed Mount Jefferson. So seeing these photos for the first time just gave me chills. It gives me chills now. And it was engulfed in the eclipse itself, kind of did a little spin around. And looked back at the receding shadow with another one of our balloons in it. I was so thrilled. All of our failure and ambition and preparation had paid off, and I got the answer I'd been looking for about 5 years. This is what the shadow of the moon looks like on the face of the Earth. Thank you. So if you have any questions or interested in being a part of a project like this, come talk to me or to David if you're down your home. Thanks.